So, as someone who passes as a cis, straight, apparently white woman, for the most part, I hate the gays. They're misbehaving right now, and my respect for the gay identity is based on how well the people who identify it behave. So I have to be homophobic to them, or else it will seem like I want to solve behavioral issues instead of targeting someone's identity for no reason. If you've never heard of Lily Tino, I'm so jealous, oh my god. Lily Tino is a transgender social media influencer, and the first time that I heard about her was when she posted a video saying that Kurt Cobain was trans for some reason. Like in the video, she says that he was probably trans because he wore dresses and some song lyrics were obvious gender dysphoria. Obviously that's dumb because lyrics can mean different things, and just because you like wearing dresses doesn't mean you're a woman. A lot of people pointed out how hypocritical this was too, because Lily is also very famous for getting very easily offended when someone speculates about her gender or even misgenders her. So for her to misgender someone who's dead and can't correct her is just a super nasty thing to do. The second time I heard of her again was when she posted another video where she goes into different women's bathrooms at Disney World and she rates the cleanliness of all of them, but she didn't blur any of the women's or children's faces that were in the background, so obviously she got a lot of backlash for that. I think a bunch of women from that video were made aware and were very furious that they got caught in the background, and there was even an investigation out for her where she'd have to pay $5,000 and also spend 5 years in jail because again she was being super creepy. There are so many terrible things about this woman, like she is just a bad person all around. At least that's what her image is like on social media. She could be a saint when the camera's off, but to everyone's knowledge she sucks. So because she sucks, people want to talk about how much she sucks. But one of the issues that they sometimes have with this woman is that they don't believe that she's trans. They will firmly use he, him pronouns for her and argue that she is a man because of how she looks, how she acts, and how she speaks, and even how she walks, which obviously just targets her and no other woman because other women have never been told how to look, how to act, or how to move their body ever in their lives. So this isn't accidentally misogynistic because she's the one person that people have told, you're not feminine enough to be a proper woman. If it's not obvious already, Lily Tino is the picture perfect caricature for what a transphobe thinks a trans woman is like. Right-wing media seems to really like labeling Lily Tino as the representative of all trans people because they forget that trans people can also be trans men. Lily is loud, rude, and sensitive about getting misgendered and will be purposefully outright rude to anybody that she just decides not to like anymore. She assumes people's genders despite getting very angry when people assume hers. She's creepy to women and children in public, and she also just unfortunately doesn't pass as a cis woman because despite her fashion, her appearance still heavily leans to be masculine, which is important for people whose trans acceptance is selective. Like she is the perfect cardboard cutout of the exact trans woman that transphobes fear. So because of all those lineups, a lot of people assume that she's a cis man posing as a trans woman to make trans women look bad. So to supposedly own her and get her back, they misgender her. I understand why they're misgendering her, but it's just not a good reason to. Because if I were a cis man posing as a trans woman to do the most evilest shit ever, and the way that you serve justice is to call me a cis man, oh wow, you got me. Anyways, like, do you see how that wouldn't matter? The second excuse is that she is a trans woman, but she does bad things, so therefore we shouldn't respect her pronouns, because I'm not trying to respect her if I'm obviously trying to hurt her feelings, and she's made it very clear how to hurt her feelings. Pretty straightforward, right? But the problem with that is that when you misgender someone just because you think they're a bad person, it implies that you treat gender recognition as a privilege to be earned, not a basic fact of identity. And if you believe that, I expect more supposedly trans allies to misgender Jeffrey Epstein or Donald Trump too, because they're also terrible people, but those supposed trans allies don't, because those men are cis, so they treat their gender identity as a basic fact. No one cares if you don't want to respect her. I bet people would even cheer you on if you went up to her just to sock her in the face, because she does do bad things that harms others, but misgendering her just becomes transphobia, because it then creates a culture where any trans person who messes up, disagrees, or annoys someone can be put in their place by being misgendered, because trans acceptance is conditional. With Lily Tino specifically, if she is the type of person who weaponizes transphobia to deflect criticism, then I believe that misgendering her helps her. It hands her an easy out because instead of being held accountable for her behavior, she can just say, see, they hate me because I'm trans, which turns valid criticism into white noise that she can cry her crocodile tears to. If she were cis, she'd still be filming people in bathrooms without consent, talking about her genitalias in front of children, and being incredibly disrespectful online. And she would hopefully still get hated on because other cis people online have gotten own backlash for those actions, but their gender never mattered. She is still a bad person, and no one is trying to defend her when people correct you on her pronouns, but that is just something that people refuse to understand. I saw that a lot of people were talking about this very obviously gay teenage boy who called Lily Tino a man, even though in the same breath he accidentally used the right pronouns, which I guess I'm glad that people have internalized trans acceptance when they don't want to be accepting. But of course, he is outwardly transphobic against both trans women and trans men. I kept seeing people defend him saying, no, his take about Lily Tino was valid. Even I, clearly the perfect trans ally, agree with him. But that still ends up reinforcing transphobic talking points again. Because when he was talking about Lily Tino, he openly said,
men do not belong in female spaces no matter what they identify as.
Which is a transphobic talking point. Because as a trans ally, you are an ally, not a trans judge. So you do not get to choose which are valid and which aren't. But overall, he is just a very hateful person and is incredibly misinformed when it comes to a lot of topics that he tries to discuss. Because he is a teenager who wants attention and is very obviously trying to be the gay equivalent to an edgy Reddit user who protects himself with the phrase "ever heard of dark humor" and then cries victim when people treat him the same way he treats everybody else. He's a teenage boy, so he's not going to take any of the criticism seriously, especially right now. Maybe he will later in his life, but not right now. This whole situation and how he's handling it feels like his content is going to attract more red hats and become a conservative gay if he chooses to stay online and continue acting how he is. His content is based on shock value bigotry for laughs and clout, because a gay person being mean to people? Oh my god, no one's ever done that before. It seems more obvious than not that he doesn't really value empathy, since he leans into a lot of identity-based attacks against people, which lines up with certain hard-right ideologies. I don't think he's completely down that route yet, so he could still learn to stop confusing cruelty with wit, because his insults aren't very clever if I heard it on the Daily Wire first. He could still understand that being part of one marginalized group doesn't excuse him to be bigoted against others, because it's still bigotry even if it comes from a boy who thinks he's parroting Regina George. But most importantly, he could still learn to find real criticism to help him grow, without taking every single statement against him as a personal attack, which of course is easier said than done, but still necessary, especially if he wants to stay as an online creator. I believe that he can change if he wants to, but then again, he is still an online creator who has a very big and loud echo chamber that tells him he's never done anything wrong and he's perfect just the way he is, so I doubt that he'll even want to change anytime soon. It is a little weird how much of a market there is for normal gay people, and when I say normal, that's usually a code for being loudly transphobic or polyphobic specifically. There was a viral clip of some guy who said,
"Why do people in open relationships always look like that?" I'm being very non-specific here.
I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was funny at first because I saw it as the same as when people say that the best baristas are punk MBs that have a stick and poke tattoo, until I realized that the people laughing alongside me were laughing at them, not with them. Poly and alternative people poke fun at themselves all the time, and even if you're not a part of those jokes, I think it's still fine if the majority of the people you're poking fun at are laughing alongside you. But for this video specifically, it seemed to have drawn out a lot of people who definitely bullied the weird kids in high school for wearing black clothes. There were still plenty of poly people who laughed with this video, and that's fine, but I really don't like that people are using this video and the responses to it as an example to weaponize stereotypes that alternative queer people are ugly. I don't think this person obviously did it on purpose, because some of the people who responded to the video look like him, since he's styled like a hipster. So I don't want to blame him individually, but I think it just reached the wrong crowd. It was really sad seeing the amount of gay people post things like, "When I say I'm gay a little too loud, and the weird gay keeps staring at me," and it was usually paired with the audio of "I don't want to be friends." And I understand what they're trying to say, because queer people are weird and predatory sometimes, just like straight people, but these posts are usually just punching down on people who are already socially isolated, since it just mocks people for being socially awkward, unfashionable, or not fitting into the sanitized, Instagram-friendly image of queerness, which is always what you want to see from the queer community, isn't it? I'm not trying to police how people express themselves or talk about their experiences, or deny that the queer community has its shares of quirks and uncomfortable characters, or just that people can make harmless jokes about themselves or their peers. But this being the way they're doing it feels off. I know it's meant to be a joke, but the jokes land best when they punch up. When people joke about the weird gay in public, it's easy for it to feed into stereotypes about queer people being creepy or socially unacceptable. Of course, you can still enjoy that type of humor privately or in your own circle, but maybe online make it a bit more clear that you're laughing at the specific situation, not reinforcing the idea that visibly awkward or uncomfortable queer people are a problem by default. Like this one video I saw a couple times on TikTok where it goes like, "The reason I hate telling people I'm trans is because they think I'm this," and it's just a photo of some random guy, probably from Pinterest, and then the second picture is usually the person posting it, who's usually a trans man who doesn't look like the first picture. I recently saw that some people were starting to call it out as something weird to do because the first guy doesn't even look that bad. Like, he just looks alternative, specifically the 2020 sugar rush type of aesthetic that's considered cringy now apparently, but it's a stereotype that trans men are always alternative, and obviously stereotyping is bad. So trans men don't want to be associated with this stereotype because sometimes trans men aren't alternative. But it just seems like we have another boyfriend situation where they attack a trans male character for being alternative because that's a harmful stereotype, but then they genuinely end up attacking trans men who do look like that. Could you imagine if a cis man made a trend like this? I hate telling people I'm cis because they assume I'm this, but I'm different from other weird cis men. Like, you don't have to seek acceptance by distancing yourself from the weird ones. It's weird to pretend that this is for trans men's protection when it's just more respectability politics. Instead of saying, actually, trans men are diverse and all presentations are valid, it just seems like this trend outwardly means, don't worry, we're not like that guy. By the way, respectability politics is just a fancy way of saying that someone's acting like a pick-me. It's another form of lateral oppression where marginalized people are trying to gain acceptance from the dominant group by throwing other people in their community under the bus. The basic logic is, if I prove myself I'm one of the good ones and distance myself from the embarrassing people in my group, they'll accept me. It's obviously not just a gay thing, because people say I'm not like other whatever group all the time. But as everyone knows, it never truly works because conditional acceptance isn't real acceptance, which also ends up reinforcing the same systems that oppress the people within those groups in the first place. One of the most insufferable opinionated content that I've seen are gay people who are openly within right-wing spaces. And I'm not talking about gay people who happen to be right-wing just because they disagree with leftist policies, because a lot of them are bad, so I understand. But I mean specifically gay people who don't like it when other queers are weird or woke. Like, there was that huge trend of people making fun of xenogenders and neopronouns, and I know that's old news and I've talked about it before, but I want to reiterate that as confusing as those identities might seem, people use that confusion to justify hating the entire queer community. And that's obviously completely invalid because people who are gay, trans, or use xenogenders aren't hurting anyone just by existing and identifying as they do. Not understanding someone's identity isn't a good enough justification to attack them. So I always found it ridiculous when people were like, people who identify as blah 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 are ruining the queer community and making people hate us. When no, they're not. They're just using different labels that signify no direct harm, and I don't care that people are making up new ones to be happy. When I was watching this gay conservative give a review on the This Book Is Gay book, he brought up how he really liked chapter 4, Stereotypes Are Poo, when it goes into how there's a lot of stereotypes and how queer people act in subsets of those types of gays in the community. Like how there's bears and twinks with gays, but that you don't need to fit into these stereotypes to be gay or queer. And he says that he liked that chapter because when he was younger and he first came out, he thought that he had to be flamboyant to be gay because that's what the stereotype was. But he makes a small jab at the LGBTQ plus community because there's a label for everything.
Chapter 4 was my favorite chapter. Stereotypes are poo. It goes into how there's so many stereotypes in the gay community and how you should just be... It's actually kind of backwards because we always talk about like just be you and accept yourself for who you are, but there's a label for every damn thing.
Okay, as someone who really dislikes both labels and stereotypes, they're not the same thing. Sometimes they intertwine, but it's not the same thing. Stereotypes are assumptions that other people make about you based on one characteristic, like assuming all gay men are flamboyant or all lesbians are masculine. They're external judgments that get forced onto you whether you want them or not. Labels are how people choose to describe themselves. When someone identifies with any sexuality or gender, that's them finding language that feels right for their experiences. It's self-identification, not other people making assumptions about them. I personally don't like labels when it comes to the LGBTQ plus in general because I feel like it doesn't matter which gender I like or which gender I am outwardly or internally, so I choose not to label myself with any queer or gender identity and let others perceive me however they want. Because again, I don't think it matters. But this man is an outwardly gay man, and he calls himself a gay man, so I don't really understand why he doesn't like that there's a label for every damn thing when he literally uses 2 of those labels. Even if he just knew that he was gay or a man without needing to search for the right term, both gay and man are still labels. He's still using words to describe his sexuality and gender to communicate that to other people. Every time I find either an old school gay person that cares about shit like this or just a conservative gay person who wants to be the spokesperson for normal gays, they always get annoyed with people who use too many labels because they feel like queers who have more than one label, mostly when they're both gay and trans, are attention seekers. But then they literally make their entire brand about hunting these people down to interview them and make content about how weird they are. If you don't like how they present themselves because you feel like they're doing it for attention, then why would you give them attention? Again, maybe I'm biased because I personally hate all labels relatively the same because it feels like putting myself in a box. But I also understand that some people feel safe in those boxes, and some people need specific language to describe their experiences that don't fit the mainstream labels. I don't like labels for me, but I'm not trying to stop other people from using them, and I think it's incredibly tone deaf to try and get people to just be individuals before addressing the biases that make those labels necessary in the first place. Like, we can't just ignore categories when those categories are still being used to discriminate against people, and even if they weren't being used to discriminate against people, then I still wouldn't care, because identifying with something harmless is not something I want to dwell on. These gay people just don't understand that queers are already themselves when they use multiple labels, because they don't understand why these queer people are being gay in a different way than them. I watched this video that was originally titled Pride Month Fell Off and I'm Glad, before she removed the and I'm glad part. And before I actually watched it, I thought it was going to be similar to how other gay people were noticing that a lot of companies didn't change their profile picture to the rainbow version of their company's logo this year, and how it could be beneficial to the queer community since Pride can now shift back to an actual movement instead of just being about rainbow capitalism, where companies commodify LGBTQ+ identities for profit without genuine support. So I thought she was going to talk about how we could shift the focus to fighting things like anti-trans legislation that targets trans youth and restricts their access to gender-affirming care, or ending police violence and discrimination against queer communities, more specifically with Black and Latino queer communities, or protecting the rights of LGBTQ+ immigrants and asylum seekers, or challenging discriminatory laws around adoption and parenting rights. But I also really need to stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. Throughout this video, she repeatedly emphasizes how she's different from other queer people, like criticizing pride parades, distancing herself from queer ideology, and presenting herself as someone conservatives can respect because she doesn't fit their negative stereotypes. I do agree with some of the points that she brings up, like how she wants people to stop viewing queer people as monolithic in their views, because people across the sexuality and gender spectrum are different individually, and that the queer community should be more open to criticism because some queers take criticism very personally. But I just feel like her criticism is in bad faith. She is gay, but in this video she still judges other LGBTQ+ people by straight and conventional standards, like when she says,
"It should not be a controversial take to say that your gender identity and sexuality should not be the sole dictators of your belief system."
Which, sure, on the surface that's not a controversial take. It should not be controversial to say that you shouldn't determine what specific thing you want to pay more taxes on just because you're gay or trans or whatever. Except that's not what politics is for marginalized people who feel their oppression. She's treating political engagement as optional because she has enough privilege within the life that she lives, the things that she hears and sees, to feel safe. But for trans people facing healthcare bans, or queer people in less accepting areas, or those without economical security, politics isn't a choice, it's survival. And that's such a blaring pattern with a lot of gays who constantly complain about the queer community. Most gay people don't want to be political. I don't think there's anyone who wants their basic existence to be a constant debate. The dream is to just live your life without having to justify your right to exist, get married, maybe adopt kids, or access healthcare. Maybe you don't want those things specifically, but at least you get the option because everyone else gets that option. But the unfortunate reality is that when you're a part of a marginalized group, you don't always get that choice. Your existence is political whether you choose it to be or not, because other people have made it political by trying to restrict your rights. I promise I do understand the purpose of this video. I know that this video is not made for someone like me who already accepts gay people and trans people unconditionally, because I already view them as individualistic people that sometimes have behavioral flaws that need to be corrected instead of their identity, whereas a lot of conservatives and right-wingers don't. She directly addresses Republicans a couple times, like,
"To the guy who said this, and for the other 14% of Republicans who no longer support gay marriage, I understand what's led you here."
Or when she phrases herself to be more empathetic to Republican concerns.
"It's not Trump, it's the people that voted for him for reasons just like this." There's a cultural narrative around the extreme progression of the LGBT movement that drove a majority of American voters to choose Trump in the first place.
And when she validates their perspective when she refers to her gay audience.
"You're not getting a pushback from the Trump administration. you're getting a pushback from the majority of the population.
It seems like throughout this entire video, she's talking to the reasonable homophobes and transphobes because she's trying to understand them and get them to agree with her, so more people will hopefully be less homophobic, so her and her girlfriend can live peacefully as a normal couple, except she still ends up critiquing the hyperbolic version of a super specific sensitive queer and paints herself as the reasonable gay, which gives her still homophobic audience a way to deflect accusations of homophobia while still being homophobic, because see, even this gay person agrees that gay people are the problem, which is how figures like Blair White also become a token for transphobic conservatives, because they get to say, I'm not transphobic, I respect this specific trans person's pronouns, while using her to justify discriminating against every other trans person who doesn't meet my standards of respectability. But this creator also defends Blair White because she thinks people are attacking Blair for disagreeing with them, so I guess that doesn't matter. The core problem is that she treats queerness itself as something that needs to be justified through good behavior. Even though when straight people act badly, we don't say this is why people hate straight people, or straight people need to behave, or else straight people are going to lose their rights. People might make fun of them interpersonally, but their rights are never conditional. This creator essentially says that some gay and trans people's behavior does reflect poorly on all LGBTQ+ people, and therefore those people are hurting the community. She creates a hierarchy where some queer people are seen as respectable and others as embarrassing, while giving homophobic audiences permission to continue discriminating as long as they make exceptions for the ones who know their place. If she genuinely wanted to bridge build with conservatives without throwing other LGBTQ+ people under the bus, she could have focused on shared values, like when she said,
We want to act equally, be treated equally, and don't expect any special treatment.
it would have been genuinely effective bridge building content. Instead, she mixed legitimate points with harmful rhetoric by continuously validating the idea that LGBTQ+ people brought discrimination on themselves, which is such a terrible point to make, even if you are part of the community. Her video specifically is framed to have a punk aesthetic. She holds up signs with bold keywords that she says throughout this video, and as the video continues, she puts more of those signs behind her on the wall, which I find very ironic. Punk as a movement was historically about rejecting mainstream approval and challenging dominant power structures, which in other words, the opposite of gay people need to behave better so conservatives will like us. The visual framing suggests rebellion and counterculture authenticity, but the content is actually quite conformist, as if the punk aesthetic gives her arguments a veneer of being edgy or rebellious when they're actually more so aligned with conservative talking points and how queer people need to tone it down. And I'm not assuming anything because she quite literally says that gay conservatives are going against the status quo.
But over the last decade, it seems like LGBT members who consider themselves conservative have been popping up left and right.
Oh my god, cuss me, I'm a conservative.
And they face a lot of backlash for doing so. Terms like traitor, friendly fire, and my personal favorite, pick me, are common insults thrown around at those who go against the status quo.
Your politics with your sexuality are just uncommon, not against the status quo. I'm sorry, I'm gonna dwell on this because that's so disrespectful to punk culture. I still don't like labels and I'm not usually for gatekeeping words, but politics are the foundation of punk culture. It's like claiming yourself a pacifist while advocating for Israel. At some point, words have to mean something. Conservative politics literally are the status quo. Maybe you're against the status quo by being gay, but you're not against the status quo by conforming to the status quo as a gay person. Conservative politics are about maintaining existing power structures, traditional values, and established hierarchies, which is literally the opposite of punk. Real punk would be challenging the systems that make LGBTQ+ people's rights conditional in the first place, not by asking nicely for acceptance by proving you're one of the good ones. I don't care that she's a conservative, even that she's a gay conservative, but conservatives can never be punk. Gays can be punk, but she just isn't one. I've seen so many gay people who've condemned the LGBTQ+ community because they say that the queer community expects or demands you to believe everything that they believe, so it's more punk and rebellious to go against what they say, which is already incredibly vague. But the basic things that the LGBTQ+ believe as a community is that queers deserve the same rights and treatment as everyone else. It's a broad, vague belief where not everyone agrees with the specifics, but still, as a community, that's the ultimate goal. So when gay people vaguely condemn the LGBTQ+ community, of course people within the community are confused because you don't want to be treated like everyone else. You want to be wrapped up in carpets again and treated as a degenerate kink because straight and cis people don't understand what you are? Is that what you're saying? Because it just seems like they've forgotten that the reason they can live relatively normal lives today is because other people fought for those rights, but they just aren't willing to fight for the rights of people who gave them theirs. As of right now, gay people are still not fully equal to straight and cis people, which means that the LGBTQ+ as a movement has to keep going, because there are a lot of LGB and also T people who don't feel that marginalization. Maybe they don't see their erasure happening in real time, where the National Park Service successfully removed transgender and queer queer from the Stonewall National Monument's website. Then just 2 months later, the website began erasing most mentions of bisexuality. References shifted from lesbian, gay, bisexual, LGB to just gay and lesbian, with bisexual nearly wiped from the homepage and historical pages. Gay and trans people who reject the political aspects of LGBTQ+ advocacy argued that being tolerated and allowed to live is enough, but that also indirectly essentially argues for their own continued marginalization. They see the backlash against trans rights and pride visibility, and instead of standing in solidarity, their instinct is self-preservation. They either try to place other LGBTQ+ people into respectability or completely separate themselves from the community. They want to be seen as normal people with their own thoughts, opinions, and lives that exist beyond their sexuality. But the reality is, in a society where straight and cis people's identities are never questioned or politicized, it's nearly impossible for queer people to achieve that same invisibility without movement forward. Because whenever the gays do try to distance themselves from the loud and obnoxious part of the community, somehow the goalposts always seem to move anyway. But I don't know, that's just me. Laters.